It's now 6 o'clock and time to call the Planning Commission meeting of Oak Harbor, November 29, 2022 to order. Due to inclement weather, we might get interrupted this evening if we lose power. And if that happens, we lose half of our commission. We have 3 people remote. So we would just have to postpone it if it's during the public hearing until the next meeting. This will be both a physical location and a virtual meeting. A meeting may be viewed via YouTube. To leave a public comment that will be made part of the meeting record, you may attend in person or please call and leave a message at 360-279-4512, no later than 5 p.m. the day prior. The first item on the agenda this evening is roll call, and let the record show that all but Commissioner Freeman are present. The second item is the approval of the minutes October 25, 2022. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from October 25th, 2022.
A second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
It passes. The third item is the public comment, and seeing that no one is in the room and we have not received any call, one call? No public comments. Then I will close that part of the meeting. And then number 4 is the public meetings and hearings, and as I said earlier, our first item on the agenda this evening is the 2022 Comprehensive Plan Amendments and Capital Improvement Plan, and this is a public hearing, and I will open the hearing now. The hearing's open, and call on Principal Planner Kak Kamak, who will lead us through this. Kak?
Thank you. Good evening. Kak Kamak, Principal Planner, here to introduce the 2022 Comprehensive Plan Amendments. I will make my presentation really quick. We have talked about the 2022 Comprehensive Plan Amendments all year with the Planning Commission. And I'll go over I'll just summarize what we discussed all year in a slide presentation. And then I do have the capital improvements plan spreadsheets and so on a slide if the commission has questions and have comments on any of the topics that we're discussing today. So with that, I will share my screen for a quick presentation. All right. I hope you can see that. This is the 2022 Comprehensive Plan Amendments, and what we're tracking this year for amendments. So we had the housing element open in our docket for Comprehensive Plan Amendment consideration. We're implementing the Housing Action Plan. Some of the things that we have implemented are the density standards. We've done that. We're looking at this to increase our SEPA thresholds, and I think that is currently in discussion. Dennis has talked to the Planning Commission, and is also talking to the City Council on this. And what we have upcoming is the multifamily tax credit program. So this is something that will likely come up in our for next year because we have that lined up as part of our implementation plan for the Housing Action Plan. So that will be an element that will remain open as we go into next year. We also have the JPA UGA boundary capacity analysis. This is an ongoing discussion with the county. The city is very interested in initiating discussions on this. The county is weighing their resources and trying to get it on the docket as well. So this is an ongoing discussion and will continue to remain on our docket and our amendment program. And then we have the transportation element also open, and this will encompass the active transportation plan, which is already in progress. We are just waiting for one final step from WashDOT to give us the notice to proceed, and that project will be underway. And once that starts going, we'll have a lot of public comments, a lot of discussion around that. So that'll be an exciting project. What we have potentially coming up is alternate street connection plan. These are things that our engineering division is looking at, street connections within Oak Harbor to see how they can make connections more efficient with other street projects that are happening over the next 6 years and plan for them. And we also have to update our transportation plan at some point. Our transportation plan was last done in 2016, and they have a shelf life and they need to be updated. And so that's something that we'll be looking at in the next couple of years. So we also have the capital improvements plan on the docket. This is something that we do annually, and this is a budget year. So this is a very important year for the CIP. The first 2 years of the CIP match with the budget. So that kind of gives us funding for implementing projects that are funded for the first 2 years. And then we have the land use element that was open. This is where the Planning Commission had a couple discussions back in June, July, and August about land use map changes. We talked about some of the anomalies that are on the map, some of the discrepancies between that happened while we shifted from during the 2016 update from a very detailed land use map to a generalized land use map. And during that transfer, there were some properties that got misdesignated, and so we're correcting those. And the map is included in the Planning Commission packet. And I do have a couple slides to just refresh your memory on some of those properties, and I'll go over them in a little bit. And then we also talked about collapsing the planned industrial park and the planned business park. So our industrial land use designation is implemented by 3 zoning categories. And we talked about how some of these other planned industrial parks and planned business parks have additional processes that may slow down development opportunities. And so to collapse them all into the industrial section could help with that, and we can rely on our design guidelines to make sure that we get good design from any development. So that is something and that's one of the amendments we're doing to the land use element to change that language. It's a small amendment, but it has a big impact. And so something more considering economic development oriented change. And under the land use element, we also we'll have to follow through with this collapse of the PIP and the PVP into the industrial zoning land use classifications. We'll have to follow through with the zoning map changes, and that is planned for the upcoming year. So some of the changes that we're considering this year will set us up for some follow-up action that we should likely do next year. So where the check marks, capital improvements plan, the future land use map, and changes to some language in the land use section is mainly what we're considering for the 2022 comprehensive plan changes. To refresh the commission on the changes, the land use map changes, these are properties that are on North Oak Harbor Road. They are supposed to be designated planned residential estate. They got misdesignated as low density residential. This does not affect anything on the property. It does not impact the current uses. They're currently outside the city, so they're not impacted by this change. So it's mainly a policy document change. And then we have the North Whidbey Fire Department and their fire station. And I think it's an anomaly that it's designated as low density residential. Should be changed to public facilities. So this change will consider that. And there are a couple groups of properties that should be designated high-density residential. I think during the change, they got designated as low-density residential. And these are the duplexes and triplexes that are on West Whidbey and on North Barrington. And so the map is included in the Planning Commission packet for your reference. So my light goes off when I don't move too much. They got it on the sensor. All right, so I have the language here on the land use element change, the current language that talks about the planned industrial park and planned business park, and now we're changing it and generalizing into one zoning district to accommodate all the use, and that language is included in the packet as well. So the capital improvements plan, just as a reminder and refresher, the capital improvements plan documents projects that are greater than $50,000 in cost. So anything less than that is usually in the budget document. So if you don't see something here, it's not that it's missing. If it's less than 50,000, it's still probably in the budget, which the city council is considering, I think, tomorrow to approve. So I have all the fund statements for the capital improvements plan, and I'll show an example. This is just a streets table. It's all in the packet. Like I mentioned, it's a 6-year plan. The 23 and 24 is part of the budget year. So these are the projects that are would be funded if the city council approves the budget. These are the planned years where the budget is not approved yet for that. So that's kind of the layout of the CIP as an example. And I have all the tables for the various funds. And if we have any questions, we can refer back to them. But what we'd like the Planning Commission to do today, the recommended action is to conduct the public hearing and review the comprehensive plan amendments and the capital improvements plan, close the public hearing and take action. And our recommended action for today is to move these documents to the City Council for their consideration and approval. With that, I'll turn it back over to the Commission for questions and comments.
Thank you, CAC. Commissioners, comments, questions, concerns? No comments. How about the virtual
CAC, can you-
folks? Yes.
Sorry. CAC, on the changes to industrial zoning, could you describe the modifications that are going to take place, given the striking of, it seems like the striking of language around natural environment that was in the prior language and seems to be struck out of the current language? Are we looking at kind of straight, like, are we going to see things in the industrial zone where those forest buffers start to disappear and we just have large industrial zones north of town that are interconnected?
For properties that are zoned industrial, or for any property actually in the city, when they do come for development, they would have to adhere to our regulations, whether it's environmental regulations or whether it's development regulations. So if there are some natural, so between Goldie Road and Oak Harbor Road, the slope kind of falls off down to a lowland. And there's actually probably some wetlands or some wet areas in the bottom. So those areas will have to always be, no matter what happens, if they want to develop the property, they will have to do an environmental analysis and they'll have to do a wetlands report and make sure they preserve the buffers and so on. So by kind of shrinking or simplifying the language here, it doesn't take away our ability to still have environmental regulations on industrial development. This is just a policy statement that allows us to collapse these different designations into one designation. That's all we're doing. We're not taking away environmental concerns and things like that. We're doing this because over the last few years, the regulations and the codes that we have are so stringent that we can capture a lot of these impacts during development. So we're relying on our codes and regulations to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, CAC. Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion at this time.
Kat, can you put back up the proposed motion, please, on the slide?
Again,
Yep.
Yes?
I move that the city council adopt the proposed comprehensive plan amendments in the 6-year capital improvements plan.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
A second? Call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, the second item, I guess, this evening would be the monthly department report brought to us by Director David Cool. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Tonight, I'd like to direct your attention to page 343 in your packets. That's where the monthly report begins. And this month, it's a two-part concept. The very first part is a future-oriented document that gives us the 32 goals that the City Council established. So back in March of 2022, the City Council met right here in this room, and they had a facilitator to help them go through all of the possible topics and goals that they have in mind. And so back there on that wall back there, we covered it with yellow sticky notes to identify all the different types of goals that the council had, and then they tried to prioritize all those goals at the same time. Over time, they spent a lot of time figuring out what their priorities should be, and they came up with a number of different lists. The list was at the number of 11 at one time, and then it went to 19, and it wound up being 32 goals that the council would like the city to accomplish. Obviously, you can't do all those in 1 year, and as we look through the goals, you'll see that there's a number of them that seem somewhat repetitive, but they're just topic-based. So you'll see a number of interesting topics that come up within each subcategory, so it'll give you an idea of all the detail that the council wants us to work on in the future. So the first page, I've broken it down into groups of 8, so that we can get, 8 times 4 is 32. So we'll have 4 different pages that go over the different goals. And these are numerical. So the first one on the list is the top goal that the council has. And they voted on these, and they scored them in categories. So these are ranked. These are ranked goals that they have. And so the first goal that the council identified was the downtown and the marina. And the downtown revitalization is the subcategory within that area. So you'll see a number of places we talk about downtown as we go through this list. But my goal here is to help you see forward that there's a lot of things we want to work on next year. And so we'll be coming back to you in January with our work program, and it'll have a number of these topics in there. So the second goal is utility infrastructure. That's repair of utility infrastructure, which means sewer and water lines. And some of these things we're already working on. A lot of the sewer lines we're already talking about replacing. with ARPA money, federal money. Number 3, Parks and Recreation. Windjammer Park is still listed very high on the ranking. Number 4, utility rates. That's a big deal for the city council. They'd like to stabilize the utility rates, and so that's quite highly ranked. Once again, downtown and marina shows up, and that's for the expansion of the marina and downtown to try and help do improvements downtown along with revitalization that you saw in number 1. City infrastructure is next, and that's planning for future city infrastructure. Parks and Recreation, partnership between not only the departments within the city, but also with other outside agencies and the county to try and do a number of other Parks and Recreation projects. And the last one on this top 8 is the city employees and morale. As you remember, maybe you don't know, but a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, there were some challenges that some of the city employees had, and so the council listened. The council did a number of good things to try and help city employee morale, and so that's still shown as a number 8 on the list. And the reason that is because the council is still paying attention to that. So just want to let you know that that's highly ranked. So I'll go through the next slide, and it's the second 8. Downtown and Marina once again comes up, and that's the dredging project, where you probably are familiar with that, where it was dredged once before, and the bond was almost paid off, and now it's time to re-dredge it. And so that's highly ranked in order to make the marina functional. So once again, that's a highly important goal that the council has. Community development comes up next. That's joint planning area. That's always been big for the city council. They like us to work with the county to get the joint planning area expanded, as well as the urban growth area. And we're also working right now with the county to do a buildable lands analysis that the county is doing to identify the density in town as well as the number of dwelling units to figure out exactly how much capacity we have in the city. And this is, of course, countywide, but once we figure out how much capacity we have left, then we'll know if it's logical to expand the UGA and the JPA. We believe it is. We've done our own housing analysis as part of the housing plan, and it showed that we are short capacity and don't have enough in a 20-year plan. And so we'll be coming back with that concept probably in 2025, because that's the goal that the county has to update their comprehensive plan and have their buildable lands analysis done. So we started a meeting already this year on that topic, and we'll be meeting again sometime next winter to talk again with the county about that and keep that conversation going. So that one has been a big deal for the city council for quite a long time. City infrastructure, number 3 on that list, West Whidbey Avenue is important. Once again, Parks and Recreation comes up next, accessible playground. Someone on the city council, I'm not sure who, but was interested in making sure there's an accessible playground in town, so that made a high priority for them. The other category is public involvement, and public involvement is always important in city government as well as county government, so that made the list in the top 16. Community development, the next one on the list, third from the bottom, is economic development staff. So as you might know, the city is going to hire an economic development coordinator. That position has been funded through federal money for 2 years. And we are probably going to have interviews next week with, I think, 3 or 4 finalists. So the reason it's under community development is because the city council wanted that person to be stationed in the community development department so that they can work with us on the front end of development when it comes in, and have an economic development person help coordinate some of those activities. So that's why that's listed under our department. It could be funded under the city administrator, but at the same time, we're all working together to try and make sure it works. City facilities, the fire levy, of course, you know that was approved. And so that's exciting because now we'll have a new fire station, second fire station. That's in the number 15 on the list. So a lot of these things we're already doing. City infrastructure, Northeast 7th, that's been a grant that's been around for quite a long time to improve that area. And that's moving forward faster now. And so that's obviously a high priority for the city council. So I have 16 more to go, but they're all important. Community development, affordable housing. That is one where you might have heard CAC talk about some of the things we've done with affordable housing already. So he mentioned the density standards that we've changed last year. You might remember you worked on those. Those were where we had smaller lot sizes and have more density in town to provide more affordable housing. We've also have a task force that met a few years ago. Maybe some of you might have been on that. Maybe Commissioner Wassinger, maybe you were on that group, where they made a number of recommendations. And some of those recommendations were to do things like bring in a multifamily tax exemption program. And we're starting to work on that in December, and we'll try and get that done by next summer. And so that was one of the recommendations out of the group. So we're continuing to implement the recommendations from that task force that was put in the housing plan. So these are all big things that we're working on one at a time to try and get there. And feel free to interrupt me anytime you have if you have a question. Community development, the development code, that's something we always work on. We're constantly improving that. Parks and Recreation, that goal was to enhance programs in the city. Also, Parks and Recreation, Harbor Heights Park is still ranked quite importantly.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Parks, 19 Parks and Recreation, is there a plan to fund that project? Is that the reason you're?
Good question. That was moving forward last year, and they've decided to put the project on hold. They found that a lot of the roads were a lot more money to reach the park than they thought originally. So it's still in play, but it came out to be too expensive to pursue it this time. Next item is something that's already ongoing, and that's the restrooms downtown. The old restrooms have been torn down, and the Portland Loos will be going in there. So that's a project that we've been working on for quite a long time. The shoreline permit was granted. We worked on that, and so that's it's moving forward. City employees, non-represented parity. That means people that are not union. This was designed to make sure that there's some parity between the non-represented employees and the union employees. And so that's a goal of City Council to try and achieve. Community development, last from the bottom, second to the last from the bottom, infill, that's something we're already doing. The market is doing that for us. So you see a lot of infill projects going on. If you go down here on Barrington, you'll see that a number of new apartment buildings are going in. There's another one called Bayview Vista that's been through the hearing examiner. That was just approved. That's 48 units right on Barrington. And so a number of new projects happening in areas that you hadn't seen development before. If you go down where the new 20, I think it's 20 units across from the post office, you might remember there was an old house and an old shack that was there for years and years and years. It just that property just never is redeveloped, and you're starting to see properties just like that redeveloped. So infill is coming in due to the market. People are seeing opportunities to provide more affordable housing in town based on that. Last one, I don't know a whole lot about downtown and Marina, a water taxi. That could be some kind of a water taxi to get back and forth from the marina to downtown. And so a lot of future ideas contemplated in the top 16. Also downtown and Marina, they'd like to buy property. And so you're probably familiar with this lot down here. There's two lots that the city council is contemplating buying. And that way we'll control what happens. Those lots have been vacant for a long time, and they've had two old buildings there too. And so the city feels like if we get out in front of it and we go out and try and buy this stuff, we can make stuff happen. And so that's the city's goal. Next goal was one to go to a city manager form of government, and that's where, council is putting together lots of ideas. That would be a change from a strong mayor form of government to a weak mayor with a city manager instead of a strong mayor and city administrator. So that's clearly quite far down the list, and so that was just something that, a goal that came up, and it was ranked and scored. City infrastructure, the Friend Marsh, that's a goal of the city council. Community Development Task Force, that was one where some council members wanted to talk to the staff and the city about goals within the comprehensive plan. And so I think we've met with them a couple times, and I think that's still in play, but it hasn't been ranked quite as high, so I think they feel more confident that we're moving forward the right direction with the comprehensive plan. City facilities, there was talk about building new city buildings, even a new city hall. I think right now the city council is talking about remodeling this area up here, remodeling the dais, putting Tim over there in a special windowed area, and opening up this part of the council chambers, and then remodeling more items upstairs, and then remodeling downstairs where we are. And so that's probably the direction we're going to go rather than building new buildings. But it's on the list, and that's the nature of doing a facilitated meeting where people put any idea they want up there. And these are all good ideas. So Parks and Recreation, more topsoil for parks. Downtown Marina, the Navy Gate, and utility infrastructure and aquarium. So I don't know much about that, but it did make the list. So this is really the 2023 preliminary schedule of things we want to work on. And so we'll come back to you in January with our work program, as well as our 2023 docket. Council will see the docket probably in about March, and then we'll bring the docket to you. Docket is always comprehensive planning items, and work plan, work program is all the stuff we work on. Zoning changes, all the other programs that we want to move forward. So this is a forward look that we don't normally do, but I wanted to make sure you can see all the goals of the city council are what we do as a department and planning commission. So I'll certainly open it up for any questions you might have at this point. And then after that, we'll go to the next phase of this report, which is beyond page 343. So,
Hi, yes, it's Fee. I have a question.
yes, go ahead.
So my question is, what is the ETA of the Portaloo for downtown? Because I know we have a lot of people that don't have access to a bathroom, and that is one of our most used areas for one.
To answer your question, Portland Lou's in Flintstone Park. I don't know the exact timeline. Alex Warner, our city engineer, is running that project. But as I said, they've torn the old ones down, and that's in play now. So it shouldn't be too much longer before that's done.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions or comments, if I can chime in real fast. I love to see this list. I think it's fantastic that you're sharing this with us. Really helpful. A couple of questions. I love the marina aspect because I think without improving and growing the marina, it's going to be very difficult to bring in that tourist business that I think that the downtown really needs to grow and sustain and keep them viable. I guess my question is, knowing a little bit, working in a port or a marina, does the city have the capabilities to manage the kind of changes that may be required to grow that? I'm kind of just throwing this out there because I know that for us to be competitive with other marinas, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's a beautiful place, and we're on an island, and to not have, the top-notch marina available is kind of disappointing for myself at times. So that's just more of a comment, just wondering, I know this is preliminary, but if there has been thought of maybe that there has to be an expansion of staff or something to truly make that happen. So that's my first comment. My second is I have been getting some feedback on the Harbor Heights Sports Complex with folks that have properties that are adjacent, that are not in city limits, that are a little concerned and feel like maybe they're not being brought into the conversations as much as they would like to be. So that, I guess my suggestion is maybe including them. You know, they're feeling as though perhaps they're coming from a rural, and now there's going to be high traffic. I know we've had a lot of input from folks that are maybe more on like the south end neighborhoods of that, but just recently, like, specifically Yates Road north towards the base, you know, just a little bit of, you know, they're like, oh, are we going to be part of the city? Like, is there any changes of that? And obviously I don't have the answers for them, but I just wanted to pass along that I've received some input from them of wanting some, being property owners there, of some, you know, I think most of them are 2 acres to 3 acres there, just wanting to know what they're going to be backed up against and maybe communicating a little more specifically with them. That's all. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, may I answer the questions?
Yes, of course,
Oh,
David.
thank you. The first issue that Commissioner Southwood brought up was the marina. And yes, it does, it could use some reinvestment. Obviously, the dredging is a big project that needs to be done. And I think the marina is adding maybe a position in the future in this budget year. So yes, they are trying to fund more positions there. Her question was, is there a capacity, enough maybe financial support for the marina? And I'd say that's probably to be determined. I think the city council wants to work that direction to try and improve the marina and try and improve the tourism downtown. So those are great points that Commissioner Southwood brought up. We'd certainly like to be part of that, and that's why they've linked that to downtown as well, because I think the council sees those two items being linked together in a way that will bring tourism, recreation, and more economic vitality to downtown. We do think that maybe private investment, a private developer could help with this kind of a concept, because I don't think the city has the resources ourselves, to be able to pull it all off. We apply for a lot of grants and other funding to help us with this stuff, but it's all to be determined whether or not we have capacity right away. The second issue of Harbor Heights Park, we did go through a lot of processes last year to rezone the property. We put it in the comp plan. We named it Harbor Heights Park. And then we started doing a number of other parks plans. We did a survey. We surveyed everybody in the neighborhood to see what they wanted. And we tried to bring all those comments back to the public. But yes, when we start to do more, we'll certainly involve the neighborhoods more. And so her comments are well taken, because you want to involve the neighbors in something that big. We've involved them a lot already, but because we've kind of put the project on hold, my sense is we'd probably come back to the table again and involve the neighborhood again once we start moving forward with whatever phase that we're able to kick off. So that'll be determined as well. Those are longer range projects.
Thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you, David. Other concerns, questions? Commissioner Plummer? Commissioner Schott?
Thanks. I had a couple questions. So I can't see your slide right now, but was there a bullet point there around like public engagement or improving public engagement processes?
Yes, that one was on there. I don't have the list still up there, but that was to talk about public involvement, something we're always trying to improve on, and something we do a pretty good job with rezones and basic planning cases, but I think the council's goal is to try and continue to do public involvement.
Great. I would really love to see us put together a subcommittee in the Planning Commission focused on public engagement and getting voices from across the community. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but we really lack for anybody showing up at our meetings and public comment. I think we rely too heavily on just having a live stream and posting things to the web. And this clearly isn't working and bringing the voices of the community to the table. You know, even the timing of how much time we have prior to documents presented prior to meetings, I think it inhibits public in participation and public feedback. And I worry about certain voices having more of a say because of that. You know, I'd love to see us put together a subcommittee that is just like going out and looking for best practices that could be applied at the Planning Commission or make recommendations to council within our own sphere of planning, because our current processes, as well-intentioned as they are, I think just aren't meeting the need. And that's clear when we all have conversations with folks around the community and their feedback that they don't feel like the city listens to them or wants to listen to them, so they don't bother showing up. And I don't think that that's necessarily true, that the city doesn't want to listen to them. But we have this impression that isn't healthy, and we need to break through that. So I'm encouraged that the council is thinking about that, and I'd like us to think about what our role can be in public engagement. I had a question for you as well. On the porta potty issue, what was the cost comparison between a porta potty subscription or contract and installing a self-cleaning toilet like seen in other municipalities? Or was that considered?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure I understand it. Porta potties, are you referring to the Portland Loos?
I think they're given a range of names, but they're basically metallic, small bathrooms that are installed on site, and they're sort of timed. You have an amount of time in the space. There's a sink, there's a toilet, and then when someone leaves, the entire space is sprayed down by the bathroom itself. So they're common to see across France. Portland's had some, other municipalities. They handle graffiti and other kind of vandalism very well. And then they're a long-term investment in the place instead of a porta potty.
Thank you. Yeah, what we're planning to put in Flintstone Park is Portland Loos, and those are the metal facilities. I think we have some already there in Windjammer Park. So if you needed to see an example of what we're planning to put in, there are some over there closer to the city clean water facility. So if you want to see what they look like, that's the intent. I don't know exactly what the design is, if it has the automatic cleaning function and all that. But I can find out for our next meeting and let you know.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Schott. Did you want David to address anything else, Commissioner?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Commissioner Schott mentioned a subcommittee possibly being formed on public engagement and involvement. And so I leave that with you to decide or to talk about and take it from there.
Yes, Commissioner Palmer.
Thank you, David. This seems like a lot here, 32 goals. I imagine there's got to be quite a bit of administrative time. There's got to be quite a bit of record keeping and tracking that goes into this. So I'm wondering, are there KPIs that need to be met? Are there activity thresholds that need to be met in the coming year so that, you know, if something is completely untouched at the end of 2023, is it really a priority moving into 2024? And when we talk about community engagement, are there plans to define some of these more, for lack of a better word, squishy things like affordable housing? And we could debate what that means and never actually have any traction.
Good question all around, Commissioner Plumley. Yes, some of these things are a little squishy and broad in concept, and some are more specific. Do we have milestones set for a lot of these? No, we don't. This is a huge list of 32 items that we don't anticipate accomplishing in 1 year or even in 2 years, but it does give us a track to run on. And as I mentioned, a number of these things we're already doing, and so it's important to know that a lot of this stuff is a moving target. So things like the windmill that isn't even on the list is something that we're doing, and that's a big deal for the community. And so those are just things we continually work on. And as far as targets, we'll do the best we can with what we have. And so oftentimes some of these projects are based on us hiring consultants. So it's a lot of going out, finding a consultant, working on a scope of work, doing a contract with them, and then continuing to work with them as they do their job. You mentioned tracking and things like that. That's a big part of this, is because a lot of these are grant funded. And when you have grants, you have a lot of federal money and state money you have to track. And hopefully the power doesn't go out here on us. The storm's getting worse. So that's part of what we do, certainly. And great question, though. Certainly a lot on our plate here.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chazar, did you have?
Just one question, it's a silly question. Topsoil is a priority? Is it you need dirt for the parks? Is that really what that means?
I think that's what that means,
Okay.
certainly.
Okay. Just curious, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
All that takes is money. Back to Commissioner Schott's idea of trying to form a subcommittee. Do we have any input? Anybody like to continue on with that discussion or try to put something together?
Well, I do have a comment. It seems like if we really believe it's necessary, I don't believe it's a planning commission subcommittee. I believe it's a city administration function to get community input and develop. I mean, we're here to approve what the city puts before us, the administrators put before us as a recommendation to the city council, not to create recommendations for the city to work on. That's my opinion of what the planning commission is supposed to be about. I completely understand where the commissioner is coming from. Public input is extremely important. I know it's like 3 or 4 of the agenda items of the 32 that are priorities for the city to get community input on it. I don't believe it's a planning commission function. I believe it's a city function. I think we're doing things in reverse here of what our function is as a planning commission. That's my 2 cents.
Well, certainly, CAC, are you still here? CAC Kamek?
Yes, I am.
Well, you know, we have in the past done a lot, I feel, a number of different things to get city input, but there were big items that created that by nature. I tend to believe what Commissioner said, we need to maybe give the staff ideas how to increase the community involvement. Certainly it's lacking. I mean, it's pretty obvious. But there again, you know, you present the things that the city becomes concerned with, and then it, by definition, becomes a little bit more of a priority, and they tend to show up to voice their opinions. David, do you have an idea how you could help us with that, or, I don't mean to put it on your
I
shoulders, but,
appreciate that.
but,
Maybe for the next meeting, we can contemplate it and come back and put it on the agenda and see if you want to talk about it again. And in the meantime, I can talk to the city administration about it and see what feelings they have on getting the city council involved and helping to clarify their goal. That's what they have established for us. So let's see what it is they'd like to explore, and maybe they can clarify it for us.
okay, thank you, David. Commissioner Schott, is that acceptable? You have
Yes.
anything else to say at this time?
Yes, and I would just like to add, so I reached out to MRSC, Municipal Research Services, which, if folks aren't aware, it's a great resource, publicly financed in Washington State, that provides guidance under the law to Washington State municipalities and folks who participate in their processes. And so they came back with guidance from state law and what they could find on the books from Oak Harbor, and it provided more, I think, of a framework for us to fill more of an advisory role and to be bringing information to council, and not just in a pattern of what comes to us approving. And so I'm happy to share the guidance that they provided based on Washington state law, and can send that over to Sarah Heller for consideration later on another commission meeting, just for kind of background information on roles that we can step into. Thanks.
Can I chime in real fast?
Yes.
I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Sarah says. Yes, they're a great resource for us. And I think that when I joined the Planning Commission, like, there wasn't a hearing examiner. And so things were handled a bit differently. And so we're all kind of adapting to this new process. I think I feel a little disconnected sometimes from the decision making that the council is having, as though, like, I'm being asked to approve something that I haven't really. I know you do a really great job of providing me with information that's, you know, in a formal format, but it's not collaborative necessarily. So I think engaging not only the Planning Commission, but the community perhaps a little earlier on than just when we're coming down to, like, the actual voting and decision making, like, on, you know, I don't feel like I'm always getting input. You know, what comes across the Planning Commission for us to decide on, I'm not hearing the whole picture, if that makes sense. So other than outside of my own sphere. So I like the idea of us having some sort of subcommittee, although I also understand that having something separate from city council, like based on like the order of approval, doesn't necessarily make sense. It's just worth exploring and thinking on, and how we can have some of these conversations, because I think maybe people would respond more to like email, or, you know, we just have to, I know you can call in and there's certain things that are already available to people to make their public comment, but it just, I don't feel like we're getting as much as I would expect to receive based on what I hear in the community. And so that tells me there's some level of disconnect there. So that's all. But I love that we're talking through all of this, and it's, you know, this is great. It's what the community like needs, is to have these engaging conversations as we like work through this like decision making. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Shelley.
questions for anybody in the room, actually. So I've only lived here 4.5 years full-time. Been coming here 30 years, but 4.5 years full-time. Has the city of Oak Harbor ever done, for lack of a better term, a charrette with public involvement of what does Oak Harbor look like when it grows up? I mean, for lack of a better term. Have we done one of those, and has that been done recently, or is it?
To answer your question, the answer is yes. Not in my time, obviously, because of the pandemic is when I started, and so people haven't gotten together. But my sense is they've done a lot of that kind of work in the past. They've done a lot of work on the marina and downtown. A lot of studies on downtown. We have 3 or 4 of them downstairs in my office of really involved studies that were done, very detailed and
Also,
community involvement.
Windjammer Park was
Right.
huge, and all the different phases and what people wanted to see and what they didn't want to see. Now, that, we had quite a few public meetings, and they were well attended, in my view, at that time.
Oh, so
If
CAC
I
has,
may, I'm sorry.
Yes, yes, Kat.
Maybe it would be helpful to, I think maybe we're kind of looking at it a slot of time here with the Planning Commission where we've had very little public involvement. And that has changed over the years. As one of the commissioners mentioned, there's a lot of projects that have been shifted to the hearing examiner, prior to which Planning Commission would consider a lot of development projects that did attract the public. So we did have public involvement during those times. Over the years, we've had several projects, as you mentioned, Windjammer. We've had the comp plan update, where we've had our comprehensive plan vision was a big input process from the entire community. A planning commissioner from the Planning Commission actually came up with that language, the vision language, in our comp plan in the 2016 update. So over the years, there has been areas of the plan and where we've had public involvement in various ways. We also have very designed public input for the various plans and the specific projects we do. So for example, the active transportation plan, when we commission that, we will have a lot of public engagement for that very specific plan. So we see public engagement there. Now, in terms of the comprehensive plan amendments, which is what usually the Planning Commission considers, when I came here about 10, 15 years ago, there was no standard process to consider any of the amendments. And so public engagement was really hit or miss. There was no good standard procedures. And so working with the Planning Commission and City Council at that time, the current process was set up in place so that we talk about amendments all year long. So actually we do consider these amendments, even though you're deciding it here in November and December, most of these topics are discussed early in June, July, and August. And our comp plan process has captured this process so that it's consistent every year. So that if the public want to engage, they know when to come and engage with the city. So these are ways that we have tried, and from a system standpoint, to be consistent. We agree that there could be many more ways that you can engage the public, try to get input. We do it in several different projects. But we also find that some of the nature of the topics that we discuss are not the most exciting in terms of public input. So we don't get quite the interest level in some of the topics. So I'm just throwing out some thoughts and collective thoughts from the past years. This has always been a forefront for us to improve the public engagement process. And if the commission has ideas for us, we'll be open to hear your input, to try and increase that input process. But I want to just make sure that what we're doing right now is a collective way of trying to, address that in many different ways. And we'll continue to do that. There's no one solution that will solve the problem. Community keeps changing, communication media keeps changing and the way people's interests are drawn towards projects and ideas are also changing. So evolving with the technology is definitely a good thing to consider. So that's my 2 cents, and I'll stop right there.
Thank you, CAC. I agree wholeheartedly with what you have to say. Any other comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Plumley?
I want to go back to the disconnect that was mentioned between planning and city council, and I wonder if a possible solution is to develop a position between the two whereby an appointed council member attends these meetings and an appointed planning commissioner attends the council meetings. Would there be value in having that so you could look directly across at that person that is representing the other panel and ask, hey, what were your guys' thoughts? What were you looking at? What is the end goal? I think that the staff does a phenomenal job of translating between the two units, but I do share that belief that there is a disconnect between direct communication, and I wonder if that's something that could be easily remedied. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. One piece of housekeeping, Commissioner Schott has asked that to mark her as abstaining from voting on the comprehensive plan. That's it there.
One more item, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes,
may.
yes.
If you go to page
course, David.
343 in your staff report, underneath the items I just covered, we have a copy of a report that we put together for the city administrator's report. And that's a monthly report that has all the current planning projects that we do here in the city. And I know that over the years, you've wanted to know more about what happens in the city. You used to be engaged in that. That was part of your process. And then when it went to the hearing examiner, then you haven't been involved so much. So we put together this list so people can see what's happening in the city. You look across the top and it has a project name, project location, what the project is about, any permits or project number, what they're waiting for response from, if it's a current project, any comments that are pending, and any documents, as well as the dates those documents were received, so you can see when they've come in and how much time we are waiting to process the project based on it still being in a developer's hand rather than our hand. So this is a nice comprehensive list that we use. We give this to the city council every month. And I just wanted to make sure you have a copy of it. This is something I always mention, go to the city administrator's report, because that's always there for you to look at. And it's updated by Sarah and by Patty downstairs. So we really put a lot of effort into this report so that you can get a real current snapshot of what's going on in the city. Also attached to this report is a monthly permit report. And that gives you all the permits we processed for a particular month. In this case, it's October. And you can see the types of permits we're processing. You can see it's pretty diversified from right-of-way and engineering, solar energy system, mechanical permits, sewer service permits, plumbing. So a lot of different things we do in the building arena. So I just want to make sure you get a copy of that so you can see, get an idea of what we do. And once again, that's in the city administrator's report every month, so you can have a copy of that. So any questions on what we've been working on?
Thank you. Commissioners, do I have anything else for the good of the order this evening? Seeing none, meeting